I think Mona's going to move us into our little immersive view, and while we're doing that, I have the privilege of introducing an amazing panel of experts that have agreed to join us and answer some questions and give us their perspective on this issue of land acknowledgements and relate to some of the history here. So I just want to read some bios of our esteemed panelists here. I'll start with Ramon J. Vasquez. So Ramon Vasquez was born in San Antonio and is an enrolled member of the Tapilam Coahuitectan Nation. He's the son of Ramon Vasquez y Sanchez and Gloria Camarillo. In 1998, he was appointed and currently serves as Executive Director of the American Indians in Texas at the Spanish Colonial Missions. The American Indians of Texas serve the indigenous population of Central and South Texas. Ramon has spent the last 15 years working on community mobilization and community and academic partnerships, primarily focusing on reversing extinction of the American Indian descendants of the Spanish missions of northeastern Mexico and South Texas. In 2006, Ramon co-founded the National Urban Indian Family Coalition, now headquartered in Seattle, Washington. He also is a co-founder and vice president of the Land Heritage Institute Foundation in Bexar County. In 2014, he co-founded the Texas Heritage Project, which is now in partnership with Texas A&M University in San Antonio. Ramon has served as the mayor's appointed chairman for the Violence Prevention and Recidivism Reduction Committee for San Antonio's My Brother's Keeper, as well as the mayor's task force on police and community relations. In 2014, he was appointed by Mayor Julian Castro to the City of San Antonio Alamo Citizens Advisory Committee as a representative for history and archaeology. Also in 2021, he was a co-author on Battling the Alamo Toward Preservation and Protection of the Coahuitan Legacies and Campon Santos, published in 2021 in Routledge Handbook of Archaeology of Indigenous Colonial Interaction in the Americas. Please help me welcome Ramon Vasquez. Next on our panel is Rudy De La Cruz Jr. Mr. De La Cruz received his Master's of Public Administration and Master of Political Science from St. Mary's University. He also earned a double major BA in Political Science and Philosophy from that same institution. He has taught US government and Texas politics in the Alamo Colleges District over the last several decades. In 2014, he's been the project director of the Texas Heritage Project, an academic and community partnership between Northwest Vista College, American Indians in Texas and the Spanish Colonial Missions, and Alamo Press. Previously, he worked in information technology and management with the private and public sector for various companies and institutions, including Director of Program Management for BoardRamp and the Manager of Video Conference Operations for Distributed Learning at the University of Texas Health Science Center of San Antonio. Welcome to Rudy. Next on our panel is Art Martinez de Vara. He's a historian, author, and attorney. He's the winner of the 2021 Presidio La Bahia Award and numerous other writing awards. He holds a Master of Arts in History from Sam Houston State University. He holds a Doctor of Law and Master of Arts in Systematic Theology from St. Mary's University. He specializes in civil and governmental litigation and serves as tribal attorney for the Tapilam Coahuitan Nation. He was recently named Super Lawyer Rising Star by the Texas Monthly and Outstanding Lawyers in San Antonio by San Antonio Magazine. He's also served as mayor of Von Army in Von Army, Texas, here from 2008 to 2015. Chief of Staff for State Senator Connie Burton from 2014 to 16, and he currently serves as General Counsel and Policy Advisor for Bexar County Commissioner Rebecca Clay Flores. Welcome to Art Martinez de Vera. And finally, Ramon D. Vasquez is on our panel. He's a member also of the Tapilang Huawitan Nation, Native American son of Mexican Puerto Rican mother Melissa and Tapilang Huawitan father Ramon, sitting here with us. Raised in the inner city, south side of San Antonio, Texas. Ramon started his work for the American Indians in Texas at the Spanish Colonial Missions through the organization's Rites of Passage program. Ramon began facilitating classes for young boys and men of color, working through the struggles of the current education system and through life within undervalued communities. Ramon now operates AIT-SCM's Office of Community Engagement, working with children, youth, community organizers, veterans, and their families locally, statewide, and nationally. Ramon works and designs culturally competent and transformative justice-oriented professional development strategies for those organizations and facilitates the staff. He is a cultural musician and educator, and should be noted that Ramon and his family have chosen to reside in the inner city, working with undervalued communities and their families for over 10 years. His purpose is to strengthen the family and community by providing information, education, and art for cultural, spiritual support, mental wellness, parenting, social, and emotional enlightenment. Please welcome also Ramon D. Vasquez. So, with that impressive list of background and awards, I want to welcome all of you. Thank you. And we wanted to start off this panel discussion by first asking about the process that was undertaken for creating the land acknowledgement that was read earlier by Mona for San Antonio College. So if you don't mind, Ramon, if you could talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you all for having us. Thank you all for being present. Thank you to the fellow panelists as well. It's just been a wonderful opportunity to be able to work together with our team here locally and just others in the movement on a national level around what does it mean to have these conversations of land reclamation and acknowledgement. And so the process was pretty simple once we actually got into the idea that we've been doing so much Native equity work for the last since our existence as an organization, American Indians of Texas, for the last 27 years, that we really have understood that the impact that we've made in not only the work that we do for young people and families and community work, but even in the institutional level, how much education do we offer? How much insight and knowledge do we share with many different communities, particularly institutions in higher ed and K through 12 systems, that really we can consolidate into one space, and place that we can share with anybody who wants to embark on this opportunity to share in that cultural equity and tribal equity as well, by just simply doing in essence, one of the most minor things that we can do to help advance Native equity here in the city is by acknowledging the people, the history that they come from, the cultural backgrounds that they embody, and who they are today. What do they need what are the actionable items that we can contribute as individuals and institutions to help, advance prosperity for those that have experienced the types of destruction, of community, of history, of culture, and what more can we give back? And so by doing this one thing, by acknowledging just the land and the people that were here, are here, and will continue to be here for years to come, is in essence the least we can do, and so that for us becomes a really good starting point for how we build the respective relationships that need to be built in order to achieve the true Native equity that we need to see for that prosperity to exist. So we really just had to sit down and compile the information. What is it that is important to us? What is it that is important to the community members that we've served for the last 27 years? And, the people that we are going to serve in the future, those ancestors even yet to come. And so that was kind of a simple process for how we dove into what that layout needed to look like. One of the things that was important for us is that we noticed in other areas across the nation, some things became, for us, at least in our perspective, a little too easy, to just kind of say, this is homeland to these people. This is what they call it, right? What more do we want people to understand about San Antonio? In some areas of the country where there is a higher population number of identified Native American people, right? Whether it's self-identified or through tribal history, CDIBs, federal recognition, state recognition. Sometimes these kind of conversations don't have to happen so often because they're so advanced in their movement around creating that Native equity that essentially these people, these different tribal communities in these different areas are almost built into the process, of creating systemic prosperity, systemic equity. And so for here in San Antonio, with us being a 27-year-old organization, still fighting for the little bit that we can to advance this equity work for the communities that we serve directly, we needed more, right, to be shared. We needed for it to be a little bit more extensive. And in essence, we needed to ask, and essentially even share what our direct needs are from the communities that we serve. So that's why, we decided to make it a little extensive, talk some about the history, talk some about the needs and what that erasure is doing currently to the generations of youngsters that are yet to come. And so that's kind of where the process began. And so from there, we've been able to create this opportunity for this equity work to exist in many different ways beyond just the land acknowledgement, and so this is one way that we kind of jumpstart that relationship. So
thanks for that. So a similar but a little bit broader question that we wanted to open up to everyone on the panel is, how can we uplift, honor, and center the voices and experiences of our tribalized and detribalized communities here in San Antonio? So I don't know if you want to take turns, jump in. I'm sure you all have thoughts. But
yeah, Russ. First of all, thank you for y'all for doing this. Because I think exactly this is how we started. This is how we jumpstart the conversations. We have to create the safe places, right? We got to create the space that's safe, an environment that's safe to have these tough conversations, because nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to, because in order to to deal with my history and other people's history, Native history here, right, means that some people would have to have a mirror reflecting back at them. And sometimes it's easier just to forget about me and my history than for you to acknowledge, your history or whatever, right? You understand what I'm saying? So that's tough. So I think the leadership that Alamo Colleges is demonstrating right now, could you imagine if the UT system did this or the A&M system did this across the state? We would be able to have better conversations about race relations than to have conversations about discriminatory practices that are imposed on our people and that even our own people engage and impose on our own selves and others like us. So I think this is a start. This is how we do it. We bring it into the classrooms. We bring it, we use social media. We use these type of platforms to have these discussions. We shouldn't be afraid of them. There's plenty more discussions to have. Even amongst Native people, we need to have discussions. Why? Because we perpetuate discriminatory practices against ourselves. I don't know if you've heard, we're more Indian than you are. Those, for Native people, especially those that have a Spanish history, we've been shamed out of our culture time and time again, right? Whether it's by the Mexican government, the Spanish government, the church, the American government, the Texas government, and even other Indian governments. So, and we have to have these conversations. So I appreciate it. This is where it starts. And that's just, thank you very much, for the leadership that put this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Art, Rudy, do you have other other thoughts on the general question?
Yeah, I have a few comments just to kind of explain a little bit about some of the legal challenges that we face as Native peoples, specifically in Texas and in San Antonio. I mean, because of this long tradition of this myth of extinction, that there are legal obstacles to recognizing Native communities. The state of Texas eliminated its state Indian commission a few decades ago, saying that there's no more tribal communities that need to be recognized after the Kickapoo and the other federally recognized tribes gained their federal recognition. So currently in Texas, all federally recognized tribes stationed in Texas are what we term immigrant Indian groups that moved into the state of Texas, usually pushed out of other parts of the United States into Texas. But none of the indigenous peoples of Texas have ever been recognized by the state. And so they've done some resolutions and things like that, but it poses a legal challenge when we get into areas such as AIT's attempt to try to bring in federal education dollars for the urban Indian community here in Bexar County, or housing dollars and health and human services. There has to be a sponsoring tribe, because the state has taken away those mechanisms. There's no way for Coltecan, Karankawa, other communities to get federal or to get state recognition. Federal recognition poses its own challenges as well. It's probably one of the most antiquated structures within our federal government that still remains. To become federally recognized, you have to become a ward of the federal government. The federal government serves as trustee. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, they take trustee or oversight over your community properties or your tribal properties. To a certain extent, they have some control or veto over tribal council decisions. And so I don't know why any community or any person in 2021 would subject themselves to that. That's kind of a second class or subservient role. It's clearly this legacy of the 19th century. And I think, most communities find themselves under that structure because it was imposed upon them by force of arms. And so, one of the challenges that we have as a small community is how do we face the issues of wanting to assert our indigeneity and partner with the city, the county, the college district, and whatnot, and yet lacking these access to these federal or state structures of formal recognition, which either are non-existent, have been eliminated based upon the myth of extinction, or come with being subjected to a second-class status. And it becomes challenging to navigate that. So I think part of that is awareness. I know as a community college district, I mean, you do a lot of work in discussing issues of government and political science and history, but I think understanding the challenges of our local indigenous groups whose primary encounter was, our initial encounter was under the Spanish, being wards of the Catholic Church, having come under the control of the Republic of Texas in the United States, where American Indians had no citizenship rights. The community underwent this process we often term as cultural camouflage, and that it's better to outwardly present yourself as Mexican, where you have diminished political rights, than to acknowledge your indigeneity and have zero political rights. And so the community had to essentially live underground or undercover until the early 1920s, when Native Americans were actually granted citizenship in the United States. And you kind of see this process within the last 100 years of kind of reconnecting. Some folks have completely lost their connection. I guess the camouflage it became reality. And so it's a very unique history. It's very different than other indigenous groups that we see that are federally recognized, that maybe were forced onto reservations or had treaties with the federal government. And so our local community is very unique, but it also poses those challenges of in part because of the need to culturally camouflage yourself for survival that fed into the government and the dominant population's idea that all of the Native Americans were extinct. And so anyway, so we face certain structural governmental challenges to fully exercising the community's rights, or even participation in things such as ARPA funding that's coming down that should be distributed among the that's designated for American Indian communities. And here we are, San Antonio. I think we have the 10th or 11th, and everyone can correct me, largest urban Indian population in America, and yet there's no formally recognized tribal community with which to sponsor those funds. So we do face some challenges that hopefully our students can help us, and as we move forward in the future, and our academic institutions can help as we try to solve those problems.
Yeah, so we're getting some kind of ahas and things in the chat here, but and some questions. But I know that folks are going to want to know, how do we help with that recognition? I mean, is that something that we want the state to formally.
We do. So
does that make sense?
Yeah. So Tapi Lama's filed several bills the last two legislative sessions to get statutory recognition under the premise, I suppose, that reforming the State Indian Commission would probably not pass, especially through the Republican-controlled government. And the initial bill we filed passed unanimously out of the House, and then got stalled in the Senate when the General Land Office intervened, in essence, in retribution for Tapi Lama's efforts at the Alamo, trying to protect the cemetery and whatnot. They had their general counsel call over and basically stopped the bill for 2 or 3 weeks. The parliamentarian overruled them. But as you know, the time frame for passing legislation is essentially killed the bill. Last session was very squirrely with COVID, and it's very difficult to pass a lot of things. And so, in part, awareness, making, we need to kind of get more awareness that there's a need for this, and an awareness that it very much would help the urban, even from the rural centers of Texas, to be able to qualify for some of these funding. One of the challenges you have is some of the federally recognized tribes oppose even state recognition of other groups because of fear of competition from gaming. And we kind of go back to what Ramon says, that sometimes you have Indian on Indian discrimination, but that's a challenge. So unattractive from my perspective, federal recognition is, for those who have it, it does come with certain perks, and it makes it challenging to kind of unify the various groups into a common effort. But particularly here in San Antonio, it would greatly benefit the whole community to have a state federally recognized tribes, and qualify in every other way. I mean, other than that, we legally lack the structure to do it. And so I guess those are the two options we've come up with. We either create a statutory recognition where the state just by statute says we recognize this group, and if another group wants to be recognized, they pass their own statute. That's kind of the cleanest way to do it, or simplest way, or to reestablish a state Indian commission whose job is then to recognize group and either serve as a liaison from the state to the tribal communities.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Yeah. So, Rudy, did you want to add any thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah, just a little introductory. Thanks to all of y'all for inviting me to be part of this panel. I certainly do appreciate it. I want to say too that I'm really proud of Alamo colleges. Since 2015, they initiated at Northwest Vista College under the direction of Dr. Rick Baser, our president, the first formal relationship that we started out with American Indians in Texas when we created the Texas Heritage Project. And in that effort, we extended the arms of the classroom out into the community and met with the people that we know are the descendants of those who were here before us. We go to their community, we offer them opportunity to have a forum and a voice on how their history will be told. We then engage our students to go out and learn with us, extending that classroom experience out into the community. Acknowledge their existence, provide them with honor, and record the various types of histories and artifacts that they bring to bear, and show them how important they are to not just the historic past, but to the community that we live in now. We tend to think of this as being something that happened in the past and that we're looking back. But in fact, in our own classrooms in Alamo colleges and over the decades that I've been there, I've had many students in my classroom come up and tell me things like, I know that we're descendant of some native group, or we're part of a longer story here, but our family doesn't talk about it much. We don't bring it out in the open as much. It's almost a whispered type of story. And it was that kind of comment from year after year from students that really compelled me to engage with Ramon and Art Martinez de Vara. These are our co-founders and myself for the Texas Heritage Project. And we came to Dr. Baser and asked for an opportunity to have a formal arrangement so that we could engage the community with an academic background to show people that we mean business about how we're serious about acknowledging their presence. And I think when you start to do things like that and go into their turf, so to speak, and not the comfort zone of our own classrooms, they start to trust the fact that you are sincere in your efforts. We can acknowledge and we can write statements, but the actual actions where the rubber meets the road, that's what makes the difference in getting the respect for those communities and the trust that it takes for them to start opening up and telling their stories. And so keeping things at a certain level and an academic level is great, but going out and showing them that we're willing to stick our necks out, take our students out, show them the real reality of those peoples that are still here, and why that after all of these years and centuries, we are overrepresented in things like the prison systems and the penal system, and underrepresented in the halls of our legislatures and in the halls of other types of governing bodies. And when you start to do that, you start making bridges from both sides to the center. And that's what we've been doing since 2015. And so I'm really happy to see that we're finally getting to a position where we're willing as an organization, as the Alamo College District, to finally start talking in ways that are proactive, not just to reflect, but to become proactive in the community. And I think that is one of the biggest things that we can bring to bear as instructors and as people who study this culture and from that culture.
Thanks, Rudy. I appreciate it. And to everyone on the panel for weighing in. So back to the specific issue of land acknowledgements. And you know, this ties into, I think, a lot of what you've already shared with us and answers, but we want to know, the question is what impact specifically do land acknowledgements have on society? So this act of what we read today for the SAC land acknowledgement and some of what you've shared, from y'all's perspective, what's the impact of doing land acknowledgements on society?
Well, you know, Russ, it keeps us relevant to begin with, right? As the people, as the Aboriginals, a few years ago, if you would listen to San Antonio's history, you would think that when the Spanish got here, they were greeted by mariachis, right? But, things are changing now. And, it keeps our people relevant. We're no longer, we no longer become the afterthought, right? And that's one of the things that we've been taking ownership of, is that nobody's going to tell our story. So we have to be the authors of our own story, right? And that's what we've been doing. It's about reversing extinction. Phoenix, the city of Phoenix has hundreds, just a lot of different tribal communities that have occupied Phoenix, or have been in Phoenix for a long, long time. Even reservations that extend into Phoenix and some area, but the people there, the colleagues that I have there, they make sure that they acknowledge the original people. And that's what we're talking about. The Toho Odaham over there, that was their land first, before it was Navajo or anybody else. And so when institutions like this, and we're doing land acknowledgements here, it keeps us relevant. It doesn't, it moves us back into existence. And one of the things is, people would like to forget that we contributed to the development, that our people contributed to this city, to this state, and even to the country, the United States. It's easier to forget. So I think, what you guys are doing and other institutions that we've helped along the way to do land acknowledgements, I think just keeps us relevant, and on the scene. So you people will forget, especially the kids. I'm gonna say one more thing. We have more educated people in the history of the world today. And they say that history is judged by the morale of the time. And so with all the educated people that we have today, and all the untruths that we know today as educated people, and we can't make the necessary changes and adjustments for our future generations to come, it makes me wonder how they will judge us by the morale of our time. So this is where it starts.
I would add too, along with this idea of relevancy, I think at the same time we're in a really great point in time where a lot of untruths, right? A lot of lies, a lot of deception, right, is now kind of under attack, right? And the deception that has been ongoing, that has even been so rooted in the genocide of Native people and the land here, right? That it becomes systemic, right? You see how when we start looking at the roots of systemic racism, right? We look back in that simplest way of what first contact means, right? We have to look even beyond, the issues of chattel slavery, right? Into first contact. What does that mean, right? This is why the whole idea of, the transformation of Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day is important. because we are living in that time where we have to make conscious decision as even adults, right? That are raising children of new generations, in what we're going to allow, what mistruths, what untruths, what lies and deceptions are we going to allow to continue, and which ones are we going to help shed light on, right? To help bring those truths to light, to bring more than that reconciliation, right? And so I think those things are really important. You know, right now in this time where systemic racism is a hot topic, right? As American people, Americanized people, we do live in a society where trend is king, right? Not always just about money is king, right? Or cash is king, but trend is king, right? Especially in this social world, you know, and technological world. You can advance more information, you know, by the click of a button than you can, you know, by, you know, going into a library and pulling out a book, right? So there's so much opportunity right now to really help right those wrongs, right? And attack this idea of continued erasure and continued genocide of our people. Land acknowledgement is one way of doing that. It's that first step, that stepping stone to really look at, you know, what am I doing as an individual? What am I doing as a beneficiary sometimes, even of that first contact, that colonized, you know, idea, and that continued mindset. So I think these are right times for us to be having these conversations and to help rewrite that history, right? And integrate that that truth and reconciliation in there. And so yeah, I'll leave it to the rest of the panelists to share.
I do think that, that it's a good, what you're bringing up is a good segue into, you know, the next question that we have, which is, we have kind of a couple of questions within a theme regarding the land acknowledgements. So when we develop these and we read them and honor them in the classroom, what are we hoping for in terms of the student experience, right, in the classroom? So what's the hope and expectation when students hear a land acknowledgement? And you know, to follow up on the hope, it's like, what do we think that the students would do or change in terms of their behavior after experiencing a land acknowledgement?
I would hope that by experiencing a land acknowledgement, they would have a new way of looking at everything around them. The same views that they looked at since childhood, they'll see it differently when they see a river or a piece of land outside the car when they're driving through rural Texas, that their mind will wonder and imagine what must have been and know that those folks are still here, but also to kind of open that sense of wonder that allows them to see their education differently, the lands that they live on differently, the people that they meet. I think it just gives a whole new set of lenses, if you will, to view the world. And that certainly starts the questions and the engagement, you know, for our students, allowing them to ask the questions and guide us down the paths that they want to learn. But these land acknowledgements allow them to walk outside when they're walking to their car, for instance, at Northwest Vista, and see things quite differently. And on certain occasions when I've taken students around, it's amazing how they'll say, you know, we've driven past here so many times, you know, never look at it this way. And that's a powerful experience, and they'll carry that with them for the rest of their lives.
You know, go ahead, Art.
Okay, I'll make it quick. I think it can be transformative. I think for a lot of folks, especially in my generation, kind of learning about indigenous community in Texas and even my own ancestry is a process of discovery. And I think it would be transformative to have a generation who is raised or who is educated from the beginning with an understanding that the native, that our the indigenous community still exists, has always been here, and in a worldview that might stretch back 12,000 years instead of 300. I think that is a huge step that we might not see the fruit for it for decades, but having a generation educated with that premise, and it not have to be something you discover in grad school, and only a handful of them who do that, would be transformative.
Russ, when the Spanish arrived here, the whole reason that we went through the missionization process was because we didn't have a purpose as a people. And that's why they wanted to make us gente de razón. And ever since that encounter, our people have struggled with cultural identity. Even our youth today struggle with cultural identity. This society has done so much to minimize the importance of cultural identity. Today, we're having state legislators talking about, critical race thinking, removing it, right? Ethnic studies, get it out of here. Minimize what they're learning at the elementary level. At the 7th grade, you don't start learning Texas history until 7th grade. And your 4th grade experience is to go to the Alamo, where the brown people were villainized. So to me, it's been an ongoing effort to make us people with a reason, a purpose. Very much like, kill the Indian, save the man. The only good Indian was a dead Indian. And I think that, we have to push back, and we have to take back our identity, who we are. They ask me, are you Mexican? I'm like, no, I'm an American Indian that has a shared Mexican heritage, like my brothers and sisters here in the state that I live in. Because that's what I believe. That's what I am. And so, keep us confused. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I think people are oftentimes looking for the simple answer, right? Like that's a real answer, and it takes a little more than a cursory, like, oh, but I that's great for me for getting us to push.
Russ,
Okay.
before you move on, I just
Yeah.
want to add one more thought in there, right? From an experiential perspective, right? One thing that I would hope that students, and mind you, we're talking right now in this moment, and maybe we're talking even beyond this, but this is what I'm envisioning right now, because who is the audience, right? Right now, we're talking about college students, right? These are adult level students, right? Adult age people,
Right.
that had to go through an entire system beyond, before, their college experience even, where a lot of people, even people of my generation from my tribal community that experience college even, get to a place of college where they have to go through a class, that tells them that their people are extinct still to this day. They're taught that, that they have to go into a class knowing who they are, and being told that they themselves should not be there, right? That their people are extinct, they are extinct, they don't exist anymore. So, what I would hope for any student in the higher ed space of education and beyond even, in the K through 12 system, would not have to go through similar experiences that I had to go through, right? In the K through 12 system, of being that token native kid, right? And not for the, benefits of being native, right? But for the ridicule, right? For the opportunity for amusement, right? Being that token kid, right? And so, so much so to the point where I myself, decided, I made the conscious decision to say, I'm no longer going to be Native American. I'm not going to identify myself that way, I'm just going to be Puerto Rican because my mom's Puerto Rican, right? Or Mexican because the other kids that I know look like me are Mexican, right? So we're talking more beyond just this idea of what kids are what students, what these folks that are gonna learn this stuff or hear this stuff in the college level are gonna be able to gather or understand, But I imagine and empathize with those students that are Native, that do identify as Native. What are they going to experience, right? What are they going to have to go through? Because we're not doing a good enough job of creating safe spaces like this, right? For them to just even exist, right? And by educating younger children that are non-Native, right, about this work, does that, right? It helps create, opportunity for those special places and spaces to exist most often. And so that is one of my big hopes, for what students get out of this, and beyond that, what are they going to teach their children?
Yeah.
Right, when they become parents. And so that is my hope, even, for a college age student, once we get to the conversations where, this becomes more systemic around the K through 12 system, then we have a lot more work to do, so just want to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thanks for, I'm thinking of, the comment before about imagine if the UT system and the A&M system, so like you're talking about how we take this out to our educational partners and even further into the community so that this is more of a regular practice, right? So that we're having these conversations, it's top of mind, it's relevant more regularly. So that leads me to, our next question is about resources. So folks want to know, much like, you answered in the first question, and Mona has talked about the process at San Antonio College. So for those of us who are interested in developing land acknowledgements, but also just having accurate resources about the history of the city we lived, of the lands that we're on, where would y'all recommend in terms of, I know we're sharing in the chat, we're sharing a list of some links and resources, but we're wondering if you all could just talk about, good places to start with if people are moved by this and interested in doing the work.
Yeah, I'll tell you, for me, was my grandma. It was my grandma. In 1939, she was one of the persons that helped start the Native American Voters League in San Antonio, 1939, because they were being excluded from the Fiesta Patrias that the city and Mexico were planning in San Antonio. Because we were Aboriginals, we didn't fit that mold. So they took on the Mexican consulate and the city of San Antonio and LULAC, right? And so I think starting at home, finding out as much as you can, about the stories that they have. And then, of course, you can only have so many land acknowledgements for San Antonio, but so there are certain unique areas like, where Northwest Vista, where Palo Alto is, and the Voters League that I mentioned started right at SAC. So that's why I mentioned that one. But it's about, looking at the geographical location that you're in. And of course, AIT is, going to be a resource. And then you also have other resources, within your own faculty as well. I saw some comments from Margaret Greco. I've known Margaret for many, many years. And so there are other communities like the Carrizo Crudo or the Lipan Apache in Texas. So, certainly, asking is the first step.
Yeah, I love the, I mean, if I went to my grandma, it would be a very different experience, but it reminds me so much of the conversations I've had with Rudy over the years about collecting these and archiving these stories and the artifacts of people so that the history is relevant here. So I thank you so much for that advice and some of those resources. Other recommendations from others on the panel?
AIT does have a pretty extensive archive of Coltecan related sources. So if anyone's doing research, I would recommend stopping by, and it's a great resource.
By appointment.
By appointment.
Living in a pandemic, right?
Uh,
I would add that yes, I mean, of course, we're definitely a resource, but also just to share in the same thing that our executive director here was sharing, that we have many other tribal communities too that are also helping advance this cause of Native equity here and across the state, in South Texas, specifically as well. So get in touch with as many Native people as you can, although knowing that as we've shared a little bit too, the nuances of what that means too, by reaching out to many different Native people or organizations or tribal groups, because we all have very different perspectives of things. And what I would add, terminology wise, is unique perspectives of things, right? Too often do we also think about how do we create or just continue this pan-Indian perspective of what all natives think or believe, right? When each tribal community comes from a very unique place and space of how they operate, what they feel their needs are, and what history is important and relevant. And so I would just add that in there as well. There's many resources. AIT is a great one, it's a large one, but there are others. So I would add that in there as well. And what I would say too, as far as structurally, be prepared to do some introspective work and having some of these really critical but safe conversations, right? Hard conversations. And so that's one thing that I would say to just kind of prepare for, right? There's a lot of Native people out that want to make sure that this Native equity work, is advanced, and sometimes you need to know and hear other people's truths first, right? And then integrate that into your own thinking, your own way of how you're planning on moving forward, and being open to others leading, right? So I would add that as well.
Thank you. So we have we have about 7 or 8 minutes left, and I want to invite anybody who's got questions to please drop stuff in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask questions. Our last kind of culminating idea is just any advice for beyond land acknowledgements for how we can be better allies to our Native and Aboriginal friends and colleagues.
We originally had another activity for you all, so I'm going to go ahead and drop a question that we have that we wanted to make a discussion, but didn't have time because we wanted to make more time for the panelists. I'm going to go ahead and drop it in the chat as a way for you to reflect on this conversation and more conversations that need to happen as a way to have some fodder for those conversations. So I'm going to drop that in the chat right now.
Thanks, Hector. And I'm personally reflecting on, some of the stuff that Art said and how I feel like I need to do things to, improve the process from my perspective. But everybody likes to, wants to understand what they can do personally to be an ally, and if you have other ideas in terms of some of the work that we talked about here, or yeah, go ahead, Art.
At an institutional level, we've been there's a story of some Mission Indians in California. Again, we're struggling with recognition, and it all came about with the county, their local county, and recognizing them, and then that kind of started the dominoes and led them. They were seeking federal recognition, and they received that. So even on an institutional level, creating some kind of a intergovernmental agreement between the San Antonio College and tribal community, to work on certain issues and or goals to set as far as curriculum and inclusion could be a start, and helps when we have those other discussions, right? We have those discussions in the legislature, and we can show that, well, hey, the city of San Antonio has entered into this agreement with us, and that it's something to add on. It shows credibility, and especially from an academic institution, it helps dispel some of those myths which come up all the time again of extinction and invisibility and stuff like that. So on an institutional level, I think that would be a great future step to give some sort of formal acknowledgement, and that can be used as a model for others.
And real specific for current events, you can follow our Facebook pages for Tepilam or AIT, but specifically our issues are around protecting the cemeteries at the missions. Right now, that's a big issue. It's a current issue. And a lot of people don't understand it. They are burial grounds at each one of the missions. And our biggest, most, visible fight is at the Alamo right now, because we're trying to protect the cemetery at the Alamo. So, I mean, there's always something that's going on. And, we all live in a district that we can call a city council person and say, hey, look, if there's a cemetery there, we can protect it. Can we try? There are definitely ways that we can continue to support our native communities here in Texas.
And I think the other aspect of that litigation involves First Amendment protections. I think that's important to get up to speed on. I mean, we have the Alamo Chapel, if you will, the Mission Valero Chapel was built by our local indigenous community for their religious practice. And we have 2018, I believe, after Tapilam filed paperwork with the Texas Historical Commission to preserve the mission cemetery, they were met at the doors they have an annual prayer remembrance ceremony that they've been doing for decades by the Alamo Rangers, locked in arms with chains, physically barring them from entering the chapel to pray their annual remembrance ceremony. And so we've got federal litigation right now. We're at the Court of Appeals in New Orleans, where we're trying to assert the tribal community's right to access the chapel that their community built, that was dedicated for their continuous religious practice for 300 years. And so there is some, quite a bit of advocacy that could be done, or faculty could write and journal about it, and op-eds, and just to make awareness that this is a very dynamic site. Certainly there was this 1836 battle that they're building a museum for, but there's an active, continuous living community that still prays there, that still has ancestors buried there, that it still has meaning to them outside of those 13 days in 1836. And it's beyond me why those in charge cannot see the value that has to enhance the site versus trying to kind of snuff it out or pretend again that it doesn't exist. everyone I speak to, it makes the whole site come alive and gives it the proper context to understand all the various events that happen there. But those are some things to maybe get up to speed on what's going on there at the Alamo with cemetery protection and the religious practice issues, and maybe be an ally and an advocate.
Yeah, Russ, I'd like to just offer something final before we cut out. I do want to invite faculty from not just Alamo colleges, from any other institutions and multiple disciplines. We need to, as instructors, imagine how we can use these vast resources of information right outside the walls of our colleges and universities, and how we can use those disciplines to work together to create a bigger story. And there's always something, it's not just for history. There's a political angle, there's an artistic angle, there's philosophical angles, there's sociological angles. There's so many different types of multidisciplinary applications that would, if we were to engage more as an institution and encourage that from our instructors, slowly but surely, we would start to see those disciplines take on certain aspects of these teachings. And when our students go through the various classrooms, they can see the thread of truth that reigns through all the various disciplines, where we can learn from this. And so it's tough for us to think outside of our own discipline and to allow anybody else into it. We need to break down those silos and understand that we can approach this as an academic community arm in arm and from multiple disciplines, and engage our communities and our students, and create that awareness. I think that would be a great launching pad if we were able to do that in a large scale.
Thanks, Rudy. That's like we're I think especially certainly at NBC, and I know across the district, we're trying to find ways to work with curriculum and assignments and content to be better at addressing these issues. And as we talked about early in the session, we've got some folks who are real passionate about it, and some folks who are kind of apathetic, and we need to do the best we can to provide processes and information so that we can do that better. We are running up against the end of our time. I want to thank you so much to Art, Rudy, Ramon for joining us here and sharing your knowledge and everything you've done here today. And before we sign off, Hector or Mona, any last words?
Many thanks to Stephanie and Dominique for their interpretive services, y'all. Round of applause for our interpreters. Did a great job. Thank you for showing up. Thank you, the rest of you all, for doing a great job. Thank you to my colleagues throughout Alamo colleges for coming here, putting this together, and adding to the little piece of what we hope to create a truth, racial, and reckoning with our Native urban students here at Alamo colleges and throughout our communities. And many, many thanks to our American Indians of the Spanish Colonial Missions for being great partners in this, and for giving us the space and the grace to learn, and for not turning us away. So we appreciate y'all. We appreciate your brilliance and your time today. And Alamo Colleges doesn't do overtime, and so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. It is over. Hector, I'm throwing it to you.
So again, thank you to everybody who attended. Thank you for all the panelists. And the last thing in the chat, there is a resource put in there by Dr. Rocha that you should download. It gives you a lot of information on the things that we talked about. So thank you and good afternoon to everyone.